So welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the North Carolina Senate race. Governor Roy Cooper, who served in the governor's office in the state of North Carolina, a Democrat, seems to be a top recruit for Democrats as they look to see who they are going to field in the 2026 Senate races. Now, Roy Cooper, who has left it very much open to interpretation as to what his next steps are, whether it's running for office in the future or taking an entire step back from politics or potentially speaking, running for president of the United States in 2028. Roy Cooper is giving the Democratic Party this weird limbo stage where they are trying to push him to run for Senate, and these top Democrats seem to believe that they have convinced him. Roy Cooper, who served 2 terms, like I mentioned, was first elected back in 2016, elected on the same ballot that Donald Trump was, and re-elected on the same ballot that North Carolina voted for Donald Trump in the 2020 election. Roy Cooper would be an A-tier candidate, if not an S-tier candidate, in the state of North Carolina, and if they get him, would provide a unique opportunity for Democrats in this state that they have been so consistently unlucky with since the 2008 elections. North Carolina is a state that has a long history of voting for the Republican Party. Despite being close, Democrats have yet to tackle it and actually conquer it since that 2008 election, the last time there was a blue wave on the national level that ushered in a Democratic victory in North Carolina. Even in 2012, when Obama won re-election, he lost North Carolina. In fact, North Carolina was decided by a measly 14,000 votes out of millions cast in the 2008 election. To put that into perspective, Obama was winning states like Indiana by larger margins than North Carolina. Today, North Carolina stands to be a state that Trump won in the last election by roughly 4 points, Indiana by over 20. Now, Senate Democrats targeting Roy Cooper is not news in the least bit, right? What's news is that Roy Cooper seems to be quite seemingly at least, open to this idea enough so that it is nearly guaranteed that he jumps into this Senate race. When there was a lot of speculation early on about who might run for Senate in North Carolina, Roy Cooper was at the top of the ticket on the Democratic side. Although Wiley Nickel, who is a U.S. representative or was a U.S. representative, his district got redistricted in a way that just simply was unfeasible for him to win re-election, already declared that he's running for Senate, seems to be in this race in the event that Roy Cooper decides not. Now, Roy Cooper right now is taking a teaching position at Harvard, and he's roughly 20 minutes away from I am. I'm about to graduate from the undergraduate institution here, but it's been quite interesting to see that all this news is really circulated. Meanwhile, he's teaching at the public health school, and there doesn't seem to be much conversation with him directly as the former governor. After all, he is in a bit of a limbo stage too, where he just left office and now is deciding what he's going to do next. But I do think there is a pretty wide expectation from the North Carolina Democratic Party that he runs in this seat. Like I said, the history hasn't necessarily been kind to Democrats in North Carolina, but Roy Cooper has largely been an exception to that. Let me show you what I mean. When I say the 2008 elections were ones the Democrats were able to do quite well in, largely because of Obama, North Carolina was the last time they had voted for a Democrat in the U.S. Senate races. This is over a decade ago. Democrats are talking multiple presidential elections where Kay Hagan defeated Elizabeth Dole, the former first lady, who ran, or not first lady, second lady, who ran for president here in the state, not president, Senate, in the state of North Carolina. Now, it is interesting when you take a look at her electoral history, right? Had done quite well in the year 2002, but then didn't do so well, right? When it came down to, I'm also completely off base here. She was not a second lady. I'm sure some of you guys have already rushed to the comments to fix that here, but she served in the administration for George H.W. Bush and also for Ronald Reagan. But the point is that she made a name for herself in North Carolina politics, and she came from a more nationalized position, ran for Senate, won in the year 2002. All of a sudden, 6 years later, Kay Hagan's defeating her by a large margin. The point here I'm not trying to make is about Elizabeth Dole, but rather about Democrats in North Carolina, because this is the last time they were able to win. Then in 2012, Romney won the state, but like I said, Roy Cooper has been that unique, consistent exception to the Republican Party's consistent, strong performance in this state. I can show you 2016 as a good example, where Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump by roughly 3.6% in this state. It was one that Democrats had been openly vying for. They thought they were going to be in a really strong position, and the polls actually suggested that Hillary Clinton was going to win North Carolina. Ends up losing North Carolina to Donald Trump. But on the same ballot here, you might expect, okay, every other Democrat down the ballot must be written off. Well, no, that's not the case. Roy Cooper took out an incumbent Republican who won 4 years prior by 11 percentage points in North Carolina. Pat McCrory lost to Roy Cooper by just around 11,000 votes. Then 4 years later, Donald Trump lost some of his margin in North Carolina, but Roy Cooper expanded his. As a Democrat, won re-election by a margin of 4.5%. That's massive in a state like North Carolina. In fact, when you take a look at the presidential results in 2020, the highest turnout election we had seen since the year 1900, over 100 years had passed, Roy Cooper as the Democrat received more votes than Donald Trump as the presidential contender. That matters, meaning that there are categorically voters who went all in for Donald Trump and Republicans down the ballot, but voted for Roy Cooper. Because when you take a look at some of the other races, namely the lieutenant governor's race, Republicans won that one too. It seems as if Roy Cooper has a unique ability to win statewide. But even looking back prior to 2016, I've showed you 2016, I've shown you 2020, I also remember that in 2012, although the state went to Mitt Romney and Pat McCrory, the Republican governor who then Roy Cooper would overtake 4 years later, in the same race, you see Republicans doing very well down the ballot, but in the attorney general's race, Roy Cooper was so strong as a Democrat, Republicans didn't even field a challenger. That's how strong he had been known across the state, which is why he took down a Republican incumbent in a year where, quite frankly, almost every single Democrat underperformed, largely because of the top of the ticket performance for Donald Trump. And so when I get into this conversation around the 2026 Senate race, it's sort of as if the story writes itself. That if Roy Cooper gets into this race, he would be immediately the top contender on the Democratic side, clearing the nomination and likely doing very well in the general election. Because what the early data suggests, one, is that Thom Tillis, even amongst his own party, is not popular. Someone who has been able to survive election after election has only done so as a matter of circumstance. And like I said, not a single Senate election in North Carolina has ever coincided with the Democratic wave year. In 2018, there was no Senate race that coincided with that election, meaning North Carolina simply was just not on the ballot for the Senate races. Had it been there, Democrats probably would have won. Thom Tillis in 2020 was up for this Senate seat again. He's already declared that he wants to run for re-election. And so what you'll find is that in 2020, yes, he was up in a tough race against Cal Cunningham, underperformed, in a way that, incumbents typically do not. 90% of congressional incumbents win re-election, right? So it was standard that he would win, but he was still in a very competitive stage. But Cal Cunningham very largely blew that race, right? The 2020 Senate race was supposed to go much more in favor of the Democratic Party had it not been for that last-minute scandal, and also had it not been for a slight uptick in overperformance for Donald Trump. But Thom Tillis, who had been saved by Trump and was ushered in 2014, was benefiting from election after election after election, Republican wave year, Donald Trump election, non-Democratic year. I mean, it is point after point after point where you see that 2026 could have been that had Kamala Harris been president, but because she is not, Donald Trump is dragging down the Republican brand nationwide, and Thom Tillis is not a strong enough candidate to overcome that, especially with Roy Cooper as a potential on the ticket. I think that with Roy Cooper as this Democrat who might run, if I can characterize the states fast enough so we can go ahead and see, who controls what. I keep forgetting that Maine is not in the Democratic column this time around. Virginia is there. Georgia is there. Colorado and New Mexico are there. That brings us to 47, which is the exact number that Democrats have in the United States Senate. Point is that if Roy Cooper is on this ballot, I would say today, I think he would win, and I think it would give Democrats a peace of mind that they don't have to recruit top candidates in North Carolina. They don't have to invest as heavily as they might otherwise have had to. And although they definitely are not guaranteed a victory in North Carolina, this might be the one opportunity Democrats have had and will have in North Carolina since the 2008 election. We have seen Obama-Romney, Trump-Clinton, Biden-Trump, Trump-Harris, right? You are talking 4 presidential elections since Democrats won a Senate race in North Carolina. And although Democrats have really tried in the past, they tried it in 2016, lost, right? You might remember Deborah Ross ran against Richard Burr in this race, lost, right? Lost by 6 points. In 2020, they tried it again. Same candidate that's up this time around. I told you about it, Cal Cunningham and Thom Tillis. The margin lost, right, by roughly 2 points. You can see that there isn't much of a difference. Joe Biden did slightly outperform Cal Cunningham, but the point is, too, that, Donald Trump's brand was supposedly so toxic that other Republicans were supposedly outperforming him, and in some cases, they very much did. But you can see here that in North Carolina, right, that was the case. But it still was an underperformance at large for Thom Tillis because he's only outrunning the president of the United States, who was at a record low approval, who lost the presidential election, lost what was a trifecta in 2016 to a Democratic trifecta 4 years later to Joe Biden, and won't be saved this time around. by Donald Trump from being at the top of the ticket and won't be saved, supposedly, right? I mean, only time will tell, but won't be saved by a last-minute scandal that would tank the Democratic candidate. So with Roy Cooper and Democrats really trying to get him into this race, an announcement is expected in June of 2025. And I would nearly guarantee that he will be running for Senate. It will be interesting. And I think he will be a very strong candidate for the Democratic side. And I do think that it will be a competitive race. But this is probably the best case scenario for Democrats. And it looks like the stars, at least on this end, are aligning for Roy Cooper to run, for him to be the next United States Senator from North Carolina. And although it's not a guarantee that it happens, the way that things are turning out with this Trump, Vance, Musk administration, with the approval ratings falling at a rate that is similar to that of the first term, and overperformances across the country on the Democratic side, if there ever was a moment for Democrats to win back a Senate seat from North Carolina, it is this moment, and it is with Roy Cooper. And it will be very interesting to see how it ends up, how it turns out over the coming years, what he decides to do. But if I was calling it today, I say Roy Cooper runs, and I say Roy Cooper wins. And while a lot can change over the next year and a half, it will be very interesting to see how Republicans, including an unpopular incumbent Republican senator, takes down a popular, two-time elected statewide Democratic governor who's running in a blue wave year. And that will be a big test for Thom Tillis if he survives the primary. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.